Hello again and welcome to episode 15 of the Pernicious Chattel channel. Today we're going to dive back into mental health effects of capitalism. In order to try to make this story a little more interesting, I created and illustrated a short story by Ernest Hemingway called A Clean and Well-Lighted Place. But then when I finished editing my overall video, I realized it was relatively tight for me, short for me, and it didn't naturally lend itself to including any sort of interruptions. As a result, I've taken that illustrated story, which is specific to the topic I'm covering today, and I moved it to the end for those of you who are interested. Stay past the conclusion of this episode, and you can watch and listen to that short story. Are you feeling lonely? No? Then do you feel people understand you? Are your relationships the way you would like them to be? Do you have friends who you are honest and unguarded with? Do you feel you have enough relationships? Do you feel comfortable in your world? Do you feel safe? Does your anxiety wake you up at night? Do you find yourself overindulging in alcohol, drugs, or unhealthy foods? If you say yes to even a few of these statements, then you may be suffering from loneliness. A loneliness epidemic? We've all heard it, whether in hushed tones, serious dire urgency, or sensational hyperbole. The news reports and articles claiming the growing loneliness epidemic. One frequently quoted source is research by the insurance company Cigna. Cigna's study shows that 47% of Americans always feel alone, and 27% reported no one understands them. This study, and others like it, conclude that loneliness is a growing problem. Research results show younger people reporting the highest rate of loneliness. This epidemic interpretation is not universally accepted. An article by OurWorldInData.org says the higher loneliness in younger groups does not indicate a trend, as loneliness varies over a lifetime. The results may indicate that loneliness decreases with age. OurWorldInData.org also reports lower numbers of people experiencing loneliness than in other studies. This article makes a fair point, as we don't necessarily have proof that loneliness is increasing. But I tend to disagree with their conclusion that it is a less pressing problem. Loneliness is a very complicated topic, not easy to research, and does not have a clear definition. So data can vary widely depending on your definition and what questions you are asking subjects. I've made my script and research citations available if you want to reach your own conclusions. What is loneliness? We all have an intuitive notion of what loneliness is. It is theorized that loneliness is an evolutionary adaptation present in our earliest ancestors. In a hunter-gatherer society, becoming separated from your tribe would cause immediate and significant danger for an individual. You would be without the support of your tribe, undefended, and unable to easily hunt or have access to the resources provided by a group. This is why it is believed that, quote, perceptions of social isolation or loneliness increase vigilance for threat and heightened feelings of vulnerability, while also raising the desire to reconnect. Implicit hypervigilance for social threat alters psychological processes that influence physiological functioning, diminish sleep quality, and increase morbidity and mortality, close quote. Loneliness, then, is about being isolated. It is about not meeting the instinctual emotional needs that guarantee human sociability. It is a natural reaction to not having our social needs met. It is about the quality of our relationships, not the quantity. We experience it as the social equivalent of hunger or thirst. Even more surprising, social pain like this may be handled by the same neural circuits as physical pain, meaning that the suffering is no less real than breaking a bone or burning yourself. My favorite definition of loneliness is a simple one. Loneliness is any time your relationship needs exceeds the quality of your relationships. Health risks associated with loneliness. A partial list: alcohol and drug misuse, altered brain function, Alzheimer's disease progression, antisocial behavior, cardiovascular disease and stroke, decreased memory and learning, depression and suicide, increased stress levels, poor decision making. But wait, there's more. Quote, we breathe fast, our heart races, our blood pressure rises, we don't sleep, we act fearful, defensive, and self-involved, all of which drive away people who might actually want to help and tend to stop lonely people from doing what would benefit them most, reaching out to others, close quote. And I'm not done yet. Quote, loneliness, Murthy argues, lies behind a host of problems: anxiety, violence, trauma, crime, suicide, depression, political apathy, and even political polarization, close quote. What is clear is that loneliness is a cause of emotional distress. We've always known it as an unpleasant emotion, but studies increasingly show that loneliness, left untreated, is extremely bad for your health. The health concerns are so significant that some have claimed that loneliness has as much of an effect on your life as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Treatments for loneliness. There are lots of advice on the internet about loneliness. Advice like, reach out to people, get a hobby that involves other people, get training in interpersonal skills, and investigate the benefits of antidepressants. I find suggestions like expect the best, meaning trying to believe that people will welcome you into their group, and strengthen your current relationships, as very unhelpful. It's like telling a depressed person to feel better. If you could change on your own, you probably would have already. The insufficiency of simple prescriptions is probably caused by loneliness as a permanent condition. Loneliness can become an entrenched and internalized condition. A chronically lonely individual feels separate and alone, even in a crowd. They feel that no one understands them nor cares to. This is most often associated with low self-esteem. Simple treatments cannot touch loneliness once it has become this embedded, and most advice doesn't consider the full range of causes. History of loneliness. The words lonely or loneliness were used very infrequently prior to 1800, and there are people who believe that as a chronic condition, loneliness didn't exist before the social and economic changes of the 19th century. When people were living in smaller villages, depended on direct cooperation, and living in shared accommodation, loneliness simply wasn't the problem it is currently. Faye Bound-Alberti, in her book A Biography of Loneliness, The History of an Emotion, goes on to argue that loneliness is the child of capitalism and secularism, and it was naturalized by individualism. How neoliberal capitalism is creating more loneliness. I believe that the incidence and the pain of loneliness is increasing. Loneliness is a relatively modern problem, and it has been fostered by modern conditions. As these same conditions increase in frequency and scope, loneliness is also likely to increase. This is precisely the argument made in a number of studies, well-researched books, and scholarly articles. In a 2021 article published in the British Journal of Social Psychology, authors Julia C. Becker, Leah Hartwich, and S. Alexander Haslam present the findings of 4 studies. They find a direct and significant negative impact as a result of neoliberal thinking and policies. Neoliberalism causes loneliness through 2 pathways. First, it increases competition, and this competition causes emotional wear and tear. Secondly, neoliberalism erodes connections between people, strips them of access to support groups, and leaves them exposed to greater stressors with fewer emotional resources. As a result, neoliberalism is a direct and significant risk for health and well-being. A number of commenters have looked at the relationship between neoliberal capitalism and loneliness, pointing out the ways one contributes to the other. Competitive self-interest and extreme individualism create an environment where brutal competition is the norm, and people feel that they can neither trust nor cooperate with others. Then we are told to fill the void left in our lives through consumerism. But that makes things worse by intensifying social comparison, a trend that has been encouraged by the rise of social media. Neoliberalism promotes the idea that success or failure is a result of the choices you make, and this idea, broadly accepted in the modern world, results in a belief that the poor are a special case of losers incapable of acting in their own interest. A poor person, already fighting the negative effects of poverty, then has to contend with the blame and shame directed at them as the cause of their own suffering. As a result, research conducted in the UK shows that children living in poverty are twice as likely to be lonely as their peers. The culture of hustling and grinding are also very damaging to relationships, whether it be working odd hours such as nights or weekends, or simply working long hours. Modern workers find formerly valued relationships degraded to acquaintances. Even in the coveted 9-to-5 office job, workers are expected to make sacrifices such as willingness to be nationally or even internationally mobile. Obviously, moving away from friend groups and family is a recipe for loneliness. The mid-20th century drive to hollow out our cities in favor of roads, automobiles, and suburbs, all of which atomize a lived experience to the point where a person's life might be spent either alone or simply as another anonymous face in the crowd of anonymous people. Some sarcasm. But never fear, capitalism has plenty of remedies to help you medicate your loneliness. Alcohol and massive caloric foods, pornography, gambling, shopping, not to mention opioids and other drugs, are all available in record quantities and ideal for a person whose impulse control has been eroded by their sickened brain. But if unhealthy indulgences don't make you feel better, then the pharmaceutical industry is ready to step in and profit off, help you. Record amounts of antidepressants, benzodiazepines, and other symptom-masking medications are being dispensed at your local pharmacy. Maybe you're not happy or healthy, but at least you can take pride in a life sacrificed on the altar of a growing economy. And finally, a little bit of preaching. We are being sold a lie, and it's making us very, very emotionally and physically sick. We are humans, built to connect with, cooperate with, and live with other people. Neoliberal, individualist capitalism tells us we are lone wolves with a duty to compete with every other person on the planet. This is utterly, horribly, destructive, and sickeningly untrue. Wake up, it's time to demand change. Demand time with friends, reclaim our communities, dismiss and eventually outlaw the propaganda that is shoved down our throats daily. We don't need what we are being offered, and what we do need, each other and time, is within our grasp. If we're willing to stand up and say no to those who oppress us, and say yes to those who are also oppressed, our healthier, happier, and more sustainable future is planted in reestablishing human values and human communities. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Pernicious Chattel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. As usual, in the show notes are links to my script with all of my annotations and resource sources. I'm XCG, wishing you a fast and speedy trip down that road to freedom. A Clean and Well-Lighted Place. A short story by Ernest Hemingway. It was late and everyone had left the cafe except an old man who sat in the shadow of the leaves of a tree made against the electric light. In the daytime, the street was dusty, but at night the dew settled the dust and the old man liked to sit late because he was deaf, and now at night it was quiet and he felt the difference. Two waiters inside the cafe knew that the old man was a little drunk, and while he was a good client, they knew that if he became too drunk, he would leave without paying, so they kept watch on him. Last week he tried to commit suicide, one waiter said. Why? He was in despair. What about? Nothing. How do you know it was nothing? He has plenty of money. They sat together at a table that was close against the wall near the door of the cafe and looked at the terrace where the tables were all empty except where the old man sat in the shadow of the leaves of the tree that moved slightly in the wind. A girl and a soldier went by in the street. The streetlight shone on the brass number on his collar. The girl wore no head covering and hurried beside him. The guard will pick him up, one waiter said. What does it matter if he gets what he's after? He had better get off the street now, the guard will get him. They went by 5 minutes ago. The old man sitting in the shadow rapped on his saucer with his glass. The younger waiter went over to him. What do you want? The old man looked at him. Another brandy, he said. You'll be drunk, the waiter said. The old man looked at him. The waiter went away. He'll stay all night, he said to his colleague. I'm sleepy now. I never get into bed before 3 o'clock. He should have killed himself last week. The waiter took the brandy bottle and another saucer from the counter inside of the cafe and marched out to the old man's table. He put down the saucer and poured the glass full of brandy. You should have killed yourself last week, he said to the deaf man. The old man motioned with his finger. A little more, he said. The waiter poured on into the glass so that the brandy slopped over and ran down the stem into the top saucer of the pile. Thank you, the old man said. The waiter took the bottle back inside the cafe. He sat down at the table with his colleague again. He's drunk now, he said. He's drunk every night. What did he want to kill himself for? How should I know? How did he do it? He hung himself with a rope. Who cut him down? His niece. Why did they do it? Fear for his soul. How much money has he got? He's got plenty. He must be 80 years old. Anyway, I should say he was 80. I wish he would go home. I never get to bed before 3 o'clock. What kind of hour is that to go to bed? He stays up because he likes it. He's lonely. I'm not lonely. I have a wife waiting in bed for me. He had a wife once too. A wife would be no good to him now. You can't tell. He might be better with a wife. His niece looks after him. I know, you said he cut him down. I wouldn't want to be that old. An old man is a nasty thing. Not always. This old man is clean. He drinks without spilling. Even now drunk, look at him. I don't want to look at him. I wish he would go home. He has no regard for those who must work. The old man looked from his glass across the square, then over at the waiters. Another brandy, he said, pointing to his glass. The waiter, who was in a hurry, came over. Finished, he said, speaking with the omission of syntax stupid people employ when talking to drunken people or foreigners. No more tonight. Close now. Another, said the old man. No, finished. The waiter wiped the edge of the table with a towel and shook his head. The old man stood up, slowly counted the saucers, took a leather coin purse from his pocket and paid for the drinks, leaving half a pesta tip. The waiter watched him go down the street, a very old man, walking unsteadily, but with dignity. "Why didn't you let him stay and drink?" the unhurried waiter said. They were putting up the shutters. "It's not 2:30. I want to go home to bed." "What is an hour?" "More to me than to him. An hour is the same." "You talk like an old man yourself. He can buy a bottle and drink at home." "It's not the same." "No, it's not," agreed the waiter with a wife. He did not wish to be unjust. He was only in a hurry. "And you? You have no fear of going home before your usual hour? Are you trying to insult me?" "No, hombre, only to make a joke." "No," the waiter, who was in a hurry, said, rising from pulling down the metal shutters. "I have confidence. I am all confidence." "You have youth, confidence, and a job," the older waiter said. "You have everything." "And what do you lack?" "Everything but work." "You have everything I have." "No, I've never had confidence, and I am not young." "Come on, stop talking nonsense and lock up." "I am of those who like to stay late at the cafe," the older waiter said, "with all those who do not want to go to bed, with all those who need a light for the night." "I want to go home and into bed." "We are of two different kinds," the older waiter said. He was now dressed to go home. "It is not only a question of youth and confidence, although those things are very beautiful. Each night I am reluctant to close up because there may be someone who needs a cafe. Hombre, there are bodegas open all night long." "You do not understand. This is a clean and pleasant cafe. It is well lighted. The light is very good, and also now there are shadows of the leaves." "Good night," said the younger waiter. "Good night," said the other. Turning off the electric light, he continued the conversation with himself. "It is the light, of course, but it is necessary that the place be clean and pleasant. You do not want music. Certainly you do not want music, nor can you stand before a bar with dignity, although that is all that is provided for these hours." What did he fear? It was not fear or dread. It was a nothing that he knew too well. It was all a nothing, and a man was nothing too. It was only that, and light was all it needed, and a certain cleanliness and order. Some lived in it and never felt it, but he knew it was all nada y pues, nada y nada, nada y pues nada. Our nada, who art in nada, nada be thy name. Thy kingdom nada, thy will be nada, in nada as it is in nada. Give us this nada, our daily nada, and nada us our nada, as we nada our nadas, and nada not into nada, but deliver us from nada, puis nada. Hail nothing, full of nothing, nothing is with thee. He smiled and stood before a bar with its shiny steam pressure coffee machine. "What's yours?" asked the barman. "Nada." "Otros loco más," said the barman and turned away. "A little cup," said the waiter. The barman poured it for him. "The light is very bright and pleasant, but the bar is unpolished," the waiter said. The barman looked at him but did not answer. It was too late at night for conversation. "You want another copita?" the barman asked. "No, thank you," said the waiter and went out. He disliked bars and bodegas. A clean, well-lighted cafe was a very different thing. Now, without thinking further, he would go home to his room. He would lie in the bed, and finally, with daylight, he would go to sleep. After all, he said to himself, it is probably only insomnia. Many must have it.